Hey, everybody. Welcome. We have got a treat for you. Okay, so since Congress is still kind of inching forward, I don't know. I mean, I just saw a news article that said Pelosi and Mnuchin are going to be talking again, but they've been talking for a long time, so I'm not holding my breath. But we do have a special treat for you. Just as a reminder, everybody, use the Q&A button for questions. Use the chat to harass and do some shout outs, especially when you see what Jack is going to be sharing. So Jack, go ahead and share, and let's see, I'm going to make you host, or let's see, I'm going to make you host so that you can go ahead and share your screen and then turn it back over to me.
All right. So was trying to find a way to pique people's interest, and it was a very sad day when I think we all got the news, especially for those of us in a certain age group that grew up with these songs. And funny story about one of my son's elementary school teachers, beautiful woman, and heard the kids talking about her and like, oh man, she's hot kind of thing, right? And after I talked to my son about not actually saying things like that out loud, because that's not a very nice thing to say. But I get it, they were boys, but the Hot for Teacher song. So, but it was just interesting to see and that reminded me of this. But so I also, someone sent to me, let me see if I can, where did it go? I had it. Oh no, don't tell me all right. I may have to delay. Where did it go? Oh man, I messed that up. Oh, wait a minute, I found it. Okay. The evolution of the, right, of Eddie. Let's see. All right, here it is. All right, let me minimize this. Let me show this. Now, can you guys see that? You see Eddie on screen? Okay. All right. So he was cleaned up here, obviously recently. So 1918, you have maybe the first time that someone took a guitar and sat it on their lap and started playing it at that angle. Then you get into, there was a device underneath here that helps hold the device rather than there's no strap. So it kind of holds it there. Then you get into, the more horizontal versus diagonal or vertical. And then you get into Mr. Van Halen. And I think, appropriately with the expression. But what I didn't know, and I guess I really wasn't paying attention back in the 80s, that there is this pedestal device underneath that helps him hold this up, in addition to obviously the strap. But this is very much a patent that he has, and now his beneficiaries have, for this device. So I thought that was really cool to see that. And then there's the Hot for Teacher video, because I haven't talked about that enough in the past 3 or 4 minutes. So anyway, there you go. There is your totally random trivia for your Trivial Pursuit, if you still play that. Because as was alluded to, there's not a whole lot to talk about on the whole PPP stimulus stuff, other than a lot of discussions back and forth, a lot of posturing, and which is typical in an election cycle, but is typical kind of the way it's been for the past several years, as what's going on in Congress and the White House. So anyway, without getting too political, there is your gem for the day.
Oh man, it's always good. Thank you very much. If you would go ahead and host again, and then I can monitor chat and Q&A. But one thing that we did get, and Adam, I'm going to pass it over to you here real quickly, but I thought it might be good. Thank you, Vicki, for sending me this email earlier this week. And this is from B of A. I'll read some of this stuff, which reiterates how smart Adam is and how smart Jack are, or how both of those guys are. But regarding PPP forgiveness application process, processing update. The client has 10 months after the covered period ends to apply. I know that we've had that question multiple times. It's confusing. So you've got up to 10 months after the covered period ends to apply. The lender has 60 days to review after that. Then the SBA has 90 days to review and make a decision or pay the lender. So the other thing that I thought was really interesting in that, so a couple more things. Full forgiveness, SBA fully forgives the client loan. The loan is removed. Partial forgiveness, unforgiven balance converts into 2 or 5 year term loan. 1% interest, 5 years if FBA number is issued on or after 6/5. If it's not forgiven, the full balance converts into 2 or 5 year term loan, 1% interest. And then this was with Bank of America in particular. They process and remain the remaining portion of the loan for 2 to 5 year term. What was interesting, as well as all that information, which we've covered that in previous webinars. But as of today, this was a couple days ago, Bank of America is averaging 17 days to process the forgiveness application once it's received. The SBA has another story though. To date, we've only received 1 business banking PPP forgiveness application back from the SBA. Well, it's all within those time periods. So I thought that would be interesting. Vicki, thank you for doing that. Thanks for telling other people about this webinar as well. Adam, what are you hearing from additional clients? Because I know you are in meetings all day, every day with people, and talk to us a little bit about what you're hearing from the front line.
Yeah, a couple things. I think what a lot of people are concerned about is we're getting to the point of, either we're going to pass a stimulus package or we're not going to pass a stimulus package, particularly in construction, but in some other sectors as well, where, hey, we're burned off some backlog and we kind of see what's going to be coming up on the horizon up front. If I have to start letting some people go, how does that impact my forgiveness application? That's a tricky answer, in that I can tell you what it is today, and that may or may not change. What would happen today if I was in the position of needing to do some layoffs, but I wanted to have full forgiveness? This isn't, getting into, hey, is that the right thing to do or not? It's just saying, technically, how would that happen? What you would need to do is you would need to pick a cover period that would be other than the 24-week period. So it would, one, assume that I've already fully deployed the money for its intended purpose, as I planned. So that would be one, is you're going to need to pick a cover period that's less than 24 weeks, because for a lot of people, that 24 weeks either is just happening now or it's coming up pretty soon. If it's already happened, you could use the 24-week period, I suppose. But then number 2 would be that you're already not claiming some form of an exception. So your average FTE count is equivalent across your measurement period. So you got no exception applies. You're in the money that you spent the money. You got no exception applies on the average FTE count. In that scenario, if you're in that scenario and you're going to have to lay people off in the next month to 2 months, then, even though we're still unsure on the taxability side of the equation, you probably ought to ask for forgiveness. If you know that that's potentially coming, because what should happen is that the test period is at the end of your covered period. So you're done. Subsequent events, to my reading, are not supposed to be a factor. Beyond that, I'll talk for a long time, so Jack can fact check me if he wants to, but subsequent events are not supposed to be a consideration here for the purpose of forgiveness. And I apologize about the dogs barking. So if you can hear them. So independent of that, this is actually quite funny.
Amazon.
Pretty close. It'll be over in just a second.
You can talk over
You
them.
can figure out a way to edit this out. Yeah. So independent of that, if I didn't have the average FTE count working right, then then probably if I'm doing, layoffs before forgiveness, it won't matter. That's just a factor as part of my forgiveness application. I'm going to want to go with the exception. That is, the positions are no longer available due to business disruption. And you'd have to back into well, why are you disrupted? And how is that somehow related back to, something the government, something that the government has done that's created the necessity for you to have less employees that you did. So, frankly, if I was pretty confident that I was going to need to do layoffs based on my backlog, if I was in construction or for, whatever reason, it could be manufacturing, I probably would go forward with the application now, because that seems like a cleaner option than having to have demonstrated that I had a boatload of employees, met all the tests and circumstances, and then did a massive layoff, 1 week before I applied for forgiveness and try to go under that exception. But if you had to, that's what you do. You try to be making the case in the exception that, businesses decline so much that you had to lay some people off. Where you get into a sticky situation, though, is that you're basically making that decision based on the future, which is, it may have a likelihood, but it's still unknown. So it's just, that's a tough position to be in, but I think I would go forward with the application just to get it off the books and behind me rather than waiting if that was the circumstance that I was faced with. That's been probably, outside of the tax piece that we talked about based on the election, that's probably been the biggest thing that we've had come up.
All right, cool. We've got a few questions coming in here, and actually I'm going to start with one that just came in because it deals exactly with what you just finished. And it is, if we do the application now, will it be taxable in 2020?
Well, the way it reads right now, the IRS's interpretation is that it would be. So
Yeah,
that's the balance. That's the balance that you're effectively making.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things. So same thing, which is we still do not know, even though it's a week later, about the tax liability. And, is it going to happen in 2020, 2021? So we don't know if it will happen. We don't know when it will be impacted. Could be that they say, well, it's taxable, but you don't have to deal with the debits and credits of that until next year, when maybe perhaps you have more income and other things to deduct because you've generated more income in the business. And so that also, goes back to, we still don't know about the deductibility of the forgiven amounts. So anything in relation to the forgiveness or tax impact, we just have not been provided any guidance yet. And speculation would be is that would be addressed in the next version of the stimulus bill, that if it includes similar provisions, that they would say that this is how we're going to treat this. And by the way, we're also going to apply that logic to bucket number one, tranche number one of those loan funds. And so we're still in the dark with all of that stuff. And with only a couple handfuls of days to the election, even if the Senate confirmation hearings end soon, which there's speculation that that may not happen. It may be delayed a little bit. And so there's just too much distraction. So again, not meaning to be doom and gloom, it's just kind of the reality at this point for all of us.
All right, next question is up from our favorite Clean Juice client. David says, 2 questions, please, on the revised forgiveness application for loans under 50,000. And by the way, David, I hope you saw that Adam was sporting the OKL No t-shirt last week. So
That's right.
thank you again. So here's the question for application for loans under 50,000. One, how should we count employees at the time of application on the front of the form? And number two is, if a borrower got EIDL advance, must they reduce the forgiveness amount and therefore have at least $10,000 of PPP loan to pay back?
So the grant is supposed to come off the top. So in theory, you got that hanging out there as things sit now. Now, independent of that, on the employee count, I think it's just the same as anything else. It's the employee count as of the application time period.
Yeah,
Which
I
I think
would
is
agree with
consistent
that.
with the original form.
Yeah, I think the form is consistent. So it's at the time of the application that is submitted to the bank. And then as far as the EIDL, the challenge there, David, is that there is no, there has been no integration. So in theory, in best practices, there should have been a line on there that says, and by the way, tell us if you got an EIDL grant, and then, you know, do the calculations that way. But there is not the integration. And so, and I don't know if it's because the sources of those funds are technically two different places. And so they really just haven't figured out the integration. So that leads to the next question, probably on people's minds, which is, what happens if we did get the EIDL grant, we don't report it, and then are we fraudulently submitting an application for forgiveness, which is probably kind of one of the reasons for your question too. Not that you're going to do that at all, but just that, you know, it's, you know, do you account for it now in this form, or do you put it in a cover letter, or, you know, do you put it in the notes section of the application? We just don't know what the integration is. And I would suggest maybe reaching out to the banker that is handling the loan to see what they do, what they want you to do. I would also suggest, and I apologize in advance to the bankers who are on this call, but I would suggest that all of that be in writing. That, hey, banker, this is what I think I should do. Should I do this or not? And then get a written reply from them, which now speaking to the bankers on the call, will probably say something on the lines of, we don't know, so don't submit anything yet. Or
Yeah, because
go ahead and submit it, but you're taking the risk of you're doing it incorrectly.
no bank wants to be in the business servicing these loans, but technically everybody's got 10 grand hanging out because what was supposed to happen is that in our reading of the original documentation was that, you know, the EIDL loan was supposed to be added to the PPP loan, but you couldn't use it for the same purposes. You know, then they came out with hey, you get a blanket grant and that'll get taken off the top, but that, you know, so that, you know, the banks are only going to get reimbursed for what they already, you know, what they already went out, which would have been, you know, the total dollar amount. So, I mean, it really should be, you know, PPP plus 10 grand. If you got the full 10 grand or some version of that, but that's not, I think our read on it now. So.
All right, next question is, for clarification, we received $50,000 PPP. So this increases our tax liability. And do we also get to deduct the $50,000 of related payroll expenses? We've heard that one a time or two too.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, what ends up happening is you don't have to recognize the $50,000 as income, but you do not get to deduct the $50,000 of the payroll expenses that you spent the money on. So it's taxable income by a different name.
But with fingers crossed that gets fixed.
Yeah, I mean, it really should be.
Yeah, it seems like it flies in the face of the spirit of what this was intended to do. All right, next question. How do you know what's taxable if you don't know it will be forgiven? Would it not be converted on the books after the forgiveness to show the income?
So let me separate, financial statement reporting purposes versus taxability. So for financial statement reporting purposes, as soon as you have the indication that you've met the intent of it being forgivable, you're supposed to recognize it as income. So most everybody on the call, if you're reporting your financial statements, would go ahead and relieve the note and recognize it as an other income item. From the taxability standpoint, though, it's when the event occurs. So that would be when the bank tells you you've been forgiven, which is why our advice has been no sense going now, because that just ensures that you're writing a check on April 2020.
All right, next question. Would tax implication be based on the forgiveness date?
That's what we think. That would be consistent with other elements of the tax code.
All right, you guys did a good job. Any other questions out there? And if you've got, we are in Q4, and hopefully you're planning for end of year and into 2021 already. I know that we've been doing some full day planning sessions with some of our clients that we help coach and that sort of thing. So if you guys have other business related questions that you want to stump the chumps on, now's a good time to do it.
While we're waiting, can this chump bring maybe a little bit of good news into the mix, since I feel like I'm the one who's always saying we just don't know, and hey, hopefully you don't go to jail. But so there was, I read an article, and this was through the International Franchise Association that publishes essentially a daily kind of news brief. But the message was, and this is along the lines of, you are not alone. So nearly 300 public-private sector groups launched digital campaign pushing for a deal on coronavirus relief. And so it talks about the American Hotel and Lodging Association, the IFA, the International Franchise Association, National League of Cities, Airlines for America, National Retail Federation, National Restaurant Association, U.S. Travel Association, and they anticipate spending over $100,000 in the next several months in order to put pressure and get this stuff done and make sure that, to the extent that any member of Congress does not understand how important this is, that they are going to continue to put pressure on them, and that that is in the background. Even though it's interesting, again, not to discuss politics, but it's just interesting to watch how, the White House supposedly through the Treasury Secretary is discussing things with Nancy Pelosi, but yet, but Pelosi and McConnell are at odds with each other and still pointing fingers and everything else at each other. So I think that, it's just, we all need to be the squeaky wheels and continue to put pressure where we can on officials who have the ability to do something about this. And that the only way is to, and I say that only because I know some people are saying, even though they're feeling the pain, they're like, well, there's nothing really that I can do. And so there are things that you can do, and just by mere peer pressure and getting people to the table. And yes, they're distracted, but they need to know, and hopefully once these distractions are over in 2 weeks or so, then they can get back to really putting something out there by the end of the year for all of us. They are unfortunately still kind of worlds apart, and that you have people that are trying to say, well, let's just throw something out there, a life preserver related to stimulus, and deal with all these other issues separately. And then you have on the other side of the camp, it's, well, no, we're not going to do that because we're going to focus on a very big issue. But then it's, without having the stress and pressure of that issue into the mix, then all the other things become less important to get accomplished, whether it is distribution of personal protective equipment, whether it's distribution of money to cities and towns for infrastructure or for, fill those gaps. that we're focused on the business owners, and then the momentum goes away because that has been that pressure cooker has been somewhat relieved. So those are kind of the different sides of things in relation to this. And there's all kinds of other statistics that you can find. And again, depending on which channel you watch or radio show you listen to or newspaper that you read, which one is who is really the problem in doing that and in getting this done. And then you had also mentioned at the beginning some statistics about I've seen similar numbers for other banks that are here in this region with respect to the number of forgiveness applications that have been received, the turnaround time of the banks to submit them into the system, and then the complete block of not getting a response from the SBA. So there's all kinds of those issues as well as to finger pointing as to who's the problem. But I am not aware of, I haven't really asked, but not aware of a very efficient processing procedure of these forgiveness applications for those who have pushed the button to submit for forgiveness. So I don't know if you guys have found that others have received that, hey, you're good to go, whether it's the 50,000 or if it's larger than that.
All right, next question is, can we keep the PPP amount as a loan on our financial statements until it's being forgiven? Since we're an S Corp, we could have a tax liability if we book the revenue now, even if we haven't applied for forgiveness yet.
It goes back to what's your purpose. If you have to produce financial statements for a review or an audit, I would go ahead and recognize it, because it's supposed to be based on when do you believe you will receive forgiveness. And if you've met all the intents and purposes, you just haven't applied yet, you should go ahead and recognize it. If it's for if you don't have to produce financial statements for anybody, though, other than just internal, you can do what you want. But for tax purposes, I would leave it as a loan until you're forgiven.
All right, and then I've got another question that came in here, and I'm not sure if it's PPP or if it's PPL, like people. But let's see. And the question was this: how about grants versus either PPP or PPL as far as tax liability? Yesterday, we finally got approved through the state program for $25,000.
I mean, you have to assume that it'll be considered a taxable award. I think at this point, not confident in that, but you'd have to assume that it'd be considered a taxable award. But you would get to deduct the expenses, so it should end up being neutral.
All right, I'm going to endeavor into something and probably put my foot in my mouth, but I'm more curious as to your guys' perspective that, we've been talking about taxability on the federal side of things, but what about, taxability on the state side of things? And people are saying, well, that it fixes the bigger problem, which is the federal tax. But, as far as taxability on the state side, have you guys found anything, that would help us understand, or is that as open-ended as everything else is?
It's had no opinion, but we're going to hope and pray that they just piggyback off whatever the ultimate resolution is.
Yeah, it seems logical.
But hey, it's 2020. Not everything's logical. So who knows? Stay tuned. Any other questions out there? Thanks for bringing up some good ones, folks. And I'm surprised we haven't been getting harassed or encouraged by Joe today. Where are you, Joe?
It's quiet.
I went to one of our Joes last week, right after this webinar, and I had to take pictures because they do signs and they do wall graphics and huge graphics, and big arenas and stuff like that. And each of their offices is decorated differently. And one of, I think the COO's office is all like Star Wars, and like Millennium Falcon is in the window, and like it's really well done. So I had to take some pictures and send to our favorite Star Trek or Star Wars fan. You are a Trekkie guy though too, Adam, but
Yeah.
so I thought that was pretty cool. So anyway, any other questions out there?
So can I make a solicitation to the group that if any of you find yourself in this situation, and so we have a client who it's a medical practice, and one of the owners is departing, and so there's a formula in the governance documents in the operating agreement that says this is the formula for compensation, this is the formula for the buyout. The challenge is that they have this more than small number on the books, as Adam described, as cash, which is in a separate account, and then they have the corresponding liability because it's a loan technically at this point. And so the biggest point of contention at this point in trying to figure out what the purchase price is for this ownership is, well, wait a minute. Now, so you have this money that's related and should be utilized in a period of time where, and it gets even more complicated because this owner was technically not an owner at the time. I mean, he's still an owner, but he wasn't an employee. So then you have these issues that are kind of in the mix of things. So different time periods. But if anyone is dealing with this, and I'm not talking about the accounting side or legal side, I'm just talking about the practical side of things, like how you as an owner, a departing owner, or you as the co-owner with having a departing owner is kind of mentally thinking about this. I can kind of anticipate, well, of course, the departing owner saying, well, yeah, of course, that's part of the purchase price. And then you have the company that's saying, well, not so fast. I mean, it's still an obligation. Maybe it's maybe you treat it as an earnout in 2021, a contingent earnout, depending on the forgivability. But then, then you deal with, okay, well, what happens with the money that the forgiveness, but also, is it taxable? Is it not taxable? The payroll expense and those kind of things. So anyway, just throw that out there as a general solicitation. If you're dealing with that, I'd be interested in chatting with you about your perspective on that. Again, not from a legal or accounting standpoint, but just from a human being standpoint, essentially. So thank you.
Love it. By the way, thank you, Felipe. Best regards from Puerto Rico. Hey, love that place. I've been there once and it's beautiful. Haven't been able to attend the live webinars lately, but always listen to you on YouTube. Oh man, that's humbling. And like, dude, listen to some Van Halen.
I need to switch my background back. All right, I'll do that for you guys. Just so, happy thoughts as we're departing and closing this gathering. There you go.
Oh, there you go.
What is it? Happy trails to you.
Although I'm blocking one of the best ones. As a diver, you can't.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's pretty good. All right, last call for any questions. We still had 52 people on this thing live, which is still kind of blows my mind. I can't wait until we have actually more concrete stuff to talk about besides Van Halen and
Right.
some of this other stuff. But hopefully this has been of value. Again, I'll just remind everybody, if you do have questions, feel free to reach out to me at GFrey at trustbgw.com, and also include FAQ at trustbgw.com, because we still do have a dedicated group of people helping people with applications right now and that sort of thing. So we'll help in any way that we can. So again, FAQ at trustbgw.com. Well, without any further ado, what we'll do is we'll sign off. We will post this thing up if anybody tuned in here late. It'll be up on the BGW CPA YouTube channel. We're going to have to start sprinkling in some Eddie Van Halen in there too, evidently. So thank you. Hope you guys have a wonderful day and rest of the week and weekend coming up. Enjoy this beautiful weather. At least it's beautiful here in Charlotte. Take care, y'all.
Thank you.
All right.
See y'all.
See you guys.